In this video, I'm going to show you how to mask hair from difficult backgrounds. We're going to work with the same background we had in the previous example, but in this case, we're going to use a new foreground. And this woman is standing in a busy street, and as you can see, her hair does not have a lot of contrast from the background. She's blonde and she's up against a yellow background in this area. And there's also a lot of white and grays in this area that will make the hair very difficult to select. In the process of masking these types of images, it's actually very similar to the previous example. However, there are some differences. Let's start with the similarities. First, make sure that your woman layer is selected. And I'm going to click on the remove background button. Photoshop will actually do a pretty decent job. It's not bad at all considering it's just one click and the hair is up against a busy background, but obviously this is still not good enough. So I'm going to select the layer mask thumbnail and click on the select and mask button to bring up the select and mask workspace. I am currently in the on black view and that's okay. The first thing that I'm going to do is make sure that I refine the hair. In the previous video, I used the refine edge brush for that. I painted over the edges of her hair so that Photoshop could do some edge refinement on those areas. In Photoshop 2021, there's actually an automated method to do this. And you can do so by simply clicking on the refine hair button. But before I do that, I'm going to click on the show edge button so that you can see that there is no edges. And if I increase the radius like I did in the previous video, you can see the edges of the mask. But I'll leave the radius set to 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply click on Refine Edge, and this will use Adobe Sensei Artificial Intelligence to find the areas of the image that contain the hair, and it will apply the same hair refinement as painting with the Refine Edge brush tool. Now, if Photoshop selects areas that you really don't want to refine, you can click on this minus icon and paint away those areas. In this case, we only have to paint away certain areas like these areas here. But for the most part, Photoshop did a very good job. What I'm going to do now is uncheck show edge because we really don't need to look at the edge, and this is what that refinement adjustment looks like. If you need to, you can go into the brush tool to paint in areas that shouldn't be hidden, but in this case it's going to be very difficult because the background there is yellow and we're going to get some of that original background. So I don't think I can paint that area in too much, and a lot of these other elements, again, very difficult to select. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to smooth out the image a little bit and increase the contrast. I'll press OK. And I know that this time I didn't do it in 2 steps, and that's okay. The reason that I didn't do it in 2 steps is because I'm going to be hiding a lot of the hair anyway. So there was no point on doing 2 steps. What I'm going to do now is enable the background where my model will go. And the reason that I'm enabling the background is so that I can see what the hair looks like up against the background. And we might be able to use some of this hair, but for the most part, we're going to have to hide a lot of the hair that we couldn't select. And that is a dirty little secret among professional compositors. You hide things that are too difficult to select, and instead you paint back in those details. And there's 2 ways of painting hair back in Photoshop. Number 1 is to simply create a new blank layer, and I'm going to call this hair strands, and you can paint hair strands on this layer. I'm currently working with a Wacom tablet, so I will select my brush tool, and I'm going to go into my brush settings, and I'm going to make sure that the spacing is set to 1%. Shape dynamics is set to pen pressure for size jitter, and I'm also going to go back into my brush tip shape and increase the hardness so that I have a fairly hard brush. And now I can hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click to select her hair like so, and reduce my brush size by tapping on the left bracket key. And I can just paint in strands of hair. They're actually quite small because I have my brush really small, and that's okay. I don't need larger hair strands. I just need these tiny little ones and I can build upon it. Currently, I'm just painting with the same color, but I can always go back into the hair and select a different color. For example, this lighter blonde here, I'm holding Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac to select that. And I can now paint in with this new brighter color like so. And obviously I'm not going to spend the time in this video, but This is all I would need to do in order to paint those flyaway hairs. And also in areas like this one where the hair is not selected properly, I will need to go back in there and hide those pixels. So I'll click on the layer mask thumbnail. With my brush tool selected, I can paint with black. And this time I will use a larger brush and I would just paint away these hairs that don't look right. So you will have to spend a lot of time fine-tuning these details, but at the end, it will give you much, much better results. And you can just continue painting accordingly, like so. You might be able to find a hair like this one, and it's actually a little bit thicker, so I'm going to make my brush larger and then just follow its contour, like so. Again, this will take some time. I'm going to double click on the hand tool, and this is the before and the after. And there's actually another technique that you can use by creating a new custom brush. I'm going to go into this image and you can see this strand of hair. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a brush. And to do so, we need to make the hair completely black and the background completely white. To do so, we're going to go into the channels panel. And notice that each channel has different contrast between the hair and the background. Simply go into the channel that has the most contrast, in this case, the blue channel, and duplicate that channel by clicking and dragging it into the new channel icon. Then you can press Ctrl-I on Windows, Command-I on the Mac to invert that channel. And now we need to make the background black. And I know that's the opposite of what I said, but give me a moment, you'll see why I'm doing this. Then go into Image, Adjustment Levels, then make the darker pixels darker by dragging this black point to the right. And you can make the brighter pixels brighter by dragging the white point to the left. And you can adjust the gamma with this center slider. When you're done, you can press OK. Since we're in a channel, we can actually make selections out of these channels. So if I hold Control and Windows Command on the Mac and click on the channel thumbnail, Photoshop will load the bright pixels as a selection, which is why I was doing the opposite of what I told you earlier. Then click on RGB and go back into the Layers panel. Now that I'm here, I can create a new solid color fill layer and I'll fill it with black. And I can create a new solid color and make it white. And that will be our brush. I can go on the top of the layer stack and go into Edit, Define Brush Preset, and you can see the hair strands on this brush. I can just call this brush Hair and press OK. If you have the brush tool selected, you'll notice that that brush is automatically activated. If not, it will be the last brush on the brushes panel. Then I can go back into my working document and I can paint. I'm just going to create a new layer and I'll just call this one Hair Brush, just because this is where we're going to use the brush, and I can just click once and you can see the result. So what I'm going to do now is press Ctrl-Z on Windows, Command-Z on the Mac to undo, and I'm going to tap on the left bracket key on the keyboard to reduce my brush size, and you can see the preview there, and just reduce the brush size until you have something that matches the layer that you're working with. You can also click on this icon and flip your brush horizontally by clicking on Flip X. See that? Now it's facing the same side as my model. And I can use the left and right arrow keys on the keyboard to control the angle of my brush. So you see how it's rotating there when I tap on those keys? You could also use the angle adjustment from the top here. So then try to get the angle as close as possible. Maybe even make the brush a bit smaller and just paint when you're done. And in this case, you actually want to have this hairbrush beneath the woman layer. So you can click and drag it down below her, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control left bracket, that's Command left bracket on the Mac. And as you can see, we have something that looks fairly convincing. And you will need to make more brush strokes, but this time you can select the darker color and make the brush smaller and you can paint. And I'm just going to paint in several hair strands like so. So you can see that result. And obviously you can just delete the pixels that are not working. One way of deleting pixels that I like is by using just a regular brush and then holding down the tilde key. That is the key right above the tab key on North American keyboards. Or of course you can use the eraser tool. And I know that this is not looking great, but I haven't really spent time fine-tuning the image. I just wanted you to see this result. What I'm going to do now is show you a file that I've completed using exactly these same techniques, but of course, spending a little more time fine-tuning the image and painting the hair in.